The consensus narrative directs your attention to kinetic threats. It highlights assets like the new Air Defense Operations Cell in Qatar and builds a framework of fear around the missile launch. This is a strategic misdirection. The kinetic cost of challenging this shield is prohibitive, and our adversaries are not irrational. Their calculus is asymmetric. The primary vector of attack is never the enemy's point of strength. The real target is not the shield, it is the nervous system. CSIS reports detail the acute vulnerability of the undersea fiber optic cables that carry 99% of all transoceanic data, the lifeblood of the global financial system. An attack here is not loud, it is silent. A targeted severance of key nodes does not register as an act of war, it registers as a market failure. The same protocol applies to low Earth orbit. Analysts at RUSI confirm non-kinetic attacks. Dazzling, jamming, or GPS signal spoofing can achieve satellite blindness without triggering a launch-on-warning response. This creates the blind Leviathan, a financial and military superpower, suddenly deaf and dumb. It retains immense kinetic power but loses all sensory input. It cannot process transactions. It cannot verify assets. It cannot coordinate a response. A blinded system defaults to its base programming, panic. Automated trading algorithms, deprived of GPS timing signals, trigger a systemic solvency crisis. Without data integrity, every asset becomes a potential liability. The war is not for territory. It is a war on the data itself. The objective is not to defeat the Leviathan in combat, but to force it to devour itself in a liquidity vacuum. The central equation of modern warfare is no longer about force on force. It is about kinetic cost versus economic impact. Analysts at the Royal United Services Institute, or RUSI, track this asymmetry with brutal clarity. The cost to field a legacy asset like a main battle tank is conservatively estimated at $5 million. The counter asset, a commercially available drone modified for a kinetic strike, costs approximately $500. This is not a 10-to-1 advantage. It is a 10,000-to-1 cost disparity. This is the mathematical engine of what strategists call the democratization of violence. It grants non-state actors and second-tier powers the ability to inflict strategic-level economic damage previously reserved for superpowers. The objective is not to destroy the tank. The objective is to destroy the solvency of the system that builds, maintains, and deploys it. Every destroyed legacy asset is a multi-million-dollar liability written off on a national balance sheet already saturated with debt. An adversary doesn't need to win on the battlefield. They only need to make the cost of defense mathematically unsustainable, triggering a solvency crisis from a kinetic vector. The conflict vector is not where legacy media directs your attention. The front line is not a trench. It is a server farm. The staging ground is not a military base. It is a jurisdiction with exploitable instability. These are the gray zones. Conventional deterrence, exemplified by the U.S. Air Defense Operations Cell in Qatar, has made symmetric warfare prohibitively expensive. Adversaries are not deterred. They have simply shifted the calculus. The logical response is asymmetric. The objective is not occupation, it is insolvency. Analysts at RUSI and CSIS monitor regional instability, from South Africa to Canada, not as isolated crises, but as potential proxy laboratories. These zones offer plausible deniability for staging low kinetic cost attacks designed for high financial impact. The blueprint is documented. A cyber attack on critical infrastructure, such as the one repelled by Poland, is not the endgame. It is the trigger. Its purpose is to generate a shockwave of uncertainty, exploiting the market's hypersensitivity to geopolitical events, as seen in oil price volatility. This shock is the accelerant for a pre-existing systemic condition. Decades of financialization have created entities like Saks Global, enterprises built on leverage, not value. They are the dry tinder. One engineered shock can initiate a cascade of insolvencies. The next war is a solvency crisis by design. The battlefield is the balance sheet. Adversaries will not risk their assets against our military. They will use minimal force from a gray zone proxy to bankrupt our leveraged financial structure. The mathematical certainty is that the kinetic cost is irrelevant. The liability is the weapon. The terminal risk to the system is not a deliberate first strike. It is an engineered miscalculation. According to analysts at CSIS, Western Nuclear Protocol operates on a launch-on-warning doctrine. The protocol is a mathematical necessity. You cannot absorb a full-scale decapitation strike and retain retaliatory capacity. Therefore, once enemy missiles are detected by early warning radar, the launch order is given before impact. There is no time to wait for confirmation. This protocol is now the primary vector of attack. An adversary's logical action is not to launch a missile, but to launch a cyber attack that makes it appear missiles have been launched. This creates the fog of digital war. By blinding satellite and radar systems, the commander is faced with a zero-sum choice. Assume it is a cyber attack and risk total annihilation, or follow protocol and initiate a launch based on compromised data. This is not a theoretical vulnerability. It is a tested blueprint. The 2023 cyber attack on Poland's power grid, which Warsaw attributes to Russia, was a trial run against NATO critical infrastructure. The target was not the grid itself. It was a test of response time and attribution protocols. The same logic applied to the new U.S. air defense cell in Qatar demonstrates the liability. The more centralized and data-dependent our defense architecture becomes, the more vulnerable it is to a single, asymmetric point of failure. The ultimate objective is not nuclear winter. It is a solvency crisis. The kinetic cost of a single miscalculation, even a limited tactical exchange, would instantly vaporize global liquidity. The oil price volatility seen after minor geopolitical escalations would be dwarfed by a systemic seizure of all financial markets. The war is for solvency, and forcing the opponent into an impossible nuclear decision is the most effective, low-cost accelerant to trigger a full-spectrum economic collapse. The thesis of asymmetric escalation dictates that a state actor, deterred by conventional military power like the U.S. air defense cell in Qatar, will not initiate a symmetric conflict. Their attack vector is mathematical, not territorial. The objective is to trigger a solvency crisis, not win a land war. Therefore, a precursor event is required, a calibration shot, to measure the target system's fragility and response time before the primary assault. The blueprint exists. The attempted cyber attack on Poland's power grid, attributed by Warsaw to Russia, was a low-cost probe of critical infrastructure defense. It was a test of protocols. The market's hypersensitivity to geopolitical stress, demonstrated by oil prices plunging 3% on a mere de-escalatory statement, confirms the financial accelerant is in place. The system is brittle, proven by the collapse of leveraged entities like Saks. The next kinetic or non-kinetic event will be engineered to exploit this specific vulnerability. The calibration forecast. Within the next 12 months, anticipate a coordinated non-kinetic disruption targeting the primary data clearinghouse for the Port of Los Angeles Long Beach. The objective will not be to damage physical assets, but to freeze the digital ledger for 48 to 72 hours. This creates an attribution impossible traffic jam in the real economy, testing the exact time to failure for the West's over-leveraged commercial paper market. It is not an attack on ships. It is a live-fire stress test of the global solvency architecture.